What did medieval nuns really do behind those monastery walls in the Middle Ages? Were they just praying all day, cut off from everything and everyone? Or did they have secret dealings, power plays, and a whole world of connections that would shock you? Number 8. Channels for news and information. The stone walls of a medieval convent might have seemed like a barrier, separating the nuns from the clamor and currents of the outside world. Yet these very walls often enclosed vibrant hubs for the exchange of news and crucial information. Convents were not isolated islands, but rather integral nodes within broader social, political, and economic networks, and as such they became important conduits through which information flowed in and out. The sheer variety of people who regularly entered convent grounds, whether for spiritual solace, business transactions, or familial visits, ensured a continuous stream of updates from distant lands and neighboring villages alike. One of the most frequent ways news arrived within the convent was through visitors. Noble families often sent their daughters to convents for education, spiritual retreat, or sometimes as a permanent residence. When these family members, such as mothers, fathers, brothers, or even royal messengers, came to visit their relatives within the cloister, they naturally brought with them tidings from their courts, estates, or battlefields. Countess visiting her daughter, a nun, might recount the latest court gossip, the outcomes of political marriages, or the progress of a war. A knight coming to see his sister might share news of a recent pilgrimage, the mood of the common folk in his domain, or even details of a new trading route. These conversations, often held in designated parlors or visitors' rooms, were informal yet effective channels for transmitting vital social and political intelligence. The nuns, in turn, might share information about local harvests, the health of the community, or developments within the church hierarchy that had reached them through other means. These exchanges were not simply casual chatter. They allowed both the nuns and their visitors to stay informed about events shaping their interconnected worlds. Beyond family, convents also received a steady stream of ecclesiastical visitors. Bishops, abbots from male monasteries, traveling friars, and papal legates frequently passed through convent doors. These religious figures were often extensively traveled, having journeyed across dioceses, kingdoms, and even continents for various church duties. A bishop conducting a visitation might bring news from the cathedral city, directives from the Pope, or reports on the moral state of other monastic houses in the region. A Franciscan friar, having taken a vow of itinerancy, could arrive with tales from distant cities, news of new saints, or even rumors of impending crusades. These interactions were often formal, involving discussions about theological matters, the convent's adherence to its rule, or its financial dealings, but beneath the surface of official discourse, a wealth of general knowledge was shared. The nuns, particularly the abbess or prioress, would listen attentively, gathering intelligence that could be crucial for the convent's own governance, its economic planning, or its political positioning within the complex medieval landscape. Moreover, the convent's daily operations necessitated interactions with a wide array of secular individuals, all of whom carried snippets of information. Merchants and traders regularly visited to sell goods, purchase the convent's surplus produce, or transport its valuable illuminated manuscripts or textiles to market. A spice merchant from Venice might bring stories of exotic lands and new trade routes, while a local grain merchant could inform the nuns about the success or failure of the recent harvest in surrounding areas, which was critical for the convent's own food supply and economic stability. Craftsmen, such as masons, carpenters, or glaziers, were employed for construction or repair work, and during their time within the convent's precincts they would exchange news with the lay sisters and servants, and sometimes directly with the nuns, sharing news from their guilds, their hometowns, or the latest building projects in the region. These regular interactions, born out of necessity and commerce, ensured that the convent remained plugged into the economic pulse of its locale and beyond. Servants, both lay and religious, also played a significant role in information dissemination. Many convents employed a large retinue of lay servants for tasks such as cooking, cleaning, farming the lands, or caring for livestock. These individuals, drawn from the local populace, were an invaluable source of community news. They would report on local happenings such as births, deaths, marriages, festivals, or even disputes between villagers. Their conversations within the convent service areas, and sometimes directly with the nuns they served, ensured that the cloister remained aware of the social dynamics and everyday concerns of the common people living around them. Similarly, the convent's own lay sisters, who often had more direct contact with the outside world for practical duties, like procuring supplies or managing external properties, served as effective conduits, bringing back observations. Letters and written communications formed another vital avenue for information flow. While not as common as verbal exchanges, letters were critical for transmitting detailed and official news, particularly over longer distances. Abbesses exchanged correspondence with other monastic houses, with their ecclesiastical superiors, with noble patrons, and with family members. These letters might contain updates on political alliances, news of specific religious reforms, requests for prayers, or reports on the health and welfare of a distant relative. The arrival of a messenger with a sealed letter was a significant event, bringing tidings that could affect the convent's financial standing, its spiritual practices, or its social obligations. For instance, a letter from a royal court might inform the abbess of an impending visit from the king or queen, allowing the convent ample time to prepare, or it might announce a grant of land or a special privilege. Conversely, nuns would also send letters ensuring that information flowed outwards from the convent, informing their kin of their well-being, sharing spiritual insights, or sometimes even appealing for assistance in legal or financial matters. The very act of pilgrimage, though typically associated with travel to shrines, also created informational networks that impacted convents. While cloistered nuns usually did not embark on pilgrimages themselves, their convents often housed relics or were located along popular pilgrim routes. Pilgrims, coming from diverse regions and social strata, would visit these convents seeking spiritual merit, healing, or lodging. These travelers, having journeyed for days, weeks, or even months, were living encyclopedias of news. They might speak of new architectural marvels, the latest fashion trends in distant cities, the political climate of the lands they traversed, or the sermons of renowned preachers they had heard. The nuns, particularly those responsible for receiving guests or managing the hospice, would engage with these pilgrims, gleaning insights into the broader Christian world. The stories of these pilgrims, sometimes recounted in the convent's common room or refectory, provided a window into a world far beyond the convent's immediate environs, enriching the nuns' understanding of global events and diverse cultures. Even the simple act of trade and commerce brought news. Convents were often significant landowners and agricultural producers. They would sell their surplus grain, wool, wine, or dairy products at local markets. While nuns themselves might not attend these markets, their lay servants or trusted agents did, and they would return with not only profits but also market news, the prices of goods, the availability of certain commodities, and the general economic health of the region. This economic intelligence was vital for the convent's financial planning and resource management. Similarly, when the convent needed to purchase goods not produced on its own lands, such as salt iron or luxury items like parchment or pigments for manuscript illumination, interactions with various merchants and suppliers provided additional opportunities for news exchange. Every transaction, every negotiation was a chance for information to be shared, whether explicitly about market conditions or implicitly about social and political stability. Finally, political envoys and representatives, though less frequent, would also occasionally visit convents, especially those with royal or noble patronage. King's emissary might stop at a convent to deliver a message, seek refuge, or gather intelligence about local sentiment regarding royal policies. These visits, often steeped in diplomatic formality, nonetheless served as a channel for high-level political news. The abbess, often a woman of considerable social standing and political acumen, would engage with these envoys, subtly exchanging information that could benefit both the convent and the patron. For instance, a royal family might use a convent as a secure place to store important documents, and the transfer of these documents would involve interactions that naturally led to discussions of the political climate. These interactions demonstrate that convents were not merely spiritual retreats, but also important points on the medieval map for the flow of critical information, demonstrating their integrated role in the vibrant and interconnected world of the Middle Ages. Number 7. Architects of influence and builders of empire. Medieval nuns, far from being confined to passive spiritual roles, often wielded significant influence, shaping not only their local communities, but also contributing to broader spiritual and temporal landscapes. They were, in a very real sense, architects of influence and builders of a kind of spiritual and sometimes even economic empire, extending their reach through shrewd administration, strategic relationships, and the careful cultivation of their institutions. This influence manifested in various ways, from direct interaction with royalty and powerful clergy to the establishment of new monastic foundations, each act expanding their spiritual and material footprint. One primary way nuns exerted influence was through their deep and often hereditary connections to powerful, noble, and royal families. Many abbesses, and even ordinary nuns, came from the highest echelons of society. Daughters of dukes, counts, kings, and emperors populated these convents, bringing with them not only dowries but also immense social capital and a network of powerful relatives. These familial ties were not severed upon entering the cloister. Rather, they were often strategically maintained and leveraged. An abbess, being the aunt or sister of a reigning monarch, could command a level of respect and direct access that few others could achieve. She might advise her royal relatives on matters of state, appeal to them for protection or patronage, or even mediate disputes within the family or between noble houses. For instance, Queen Matilda of England, wife of King Henry I, supported and founded several convents, and her patronage allowed these institutions to flourish and extend their spiritual reach. The abbesses of these royal foundations often served as advisors to their queens, providing spiritual guidance, but also offering a discreet channel for political counsel. Convent, therefore, became a trusted space where political strategies could be discussed and influence subtly exerted, demonstrating the powerful interplay between spiritual authority and temporal power. The establishment of new convents was another potent means by which nuns extended their influence. While male monasteries often led the charge in colonization and land development, women's religious houses also played a crucial role in shaping the ecclesiastical geography of medieval Europe. The foundation of a new convent was a monumental undertaking, requiring significant financial resources, political backing, and careful planning. Often, these foundations were initiated by powerful women, such as queens or noblewomen, who then appointed an abbess and a group of nuns to populate the new institution. The abbess, in turn, would oversee the construction of buildings, the acquisition of lands, and the recruitment of new members. Each new foundation represented an expansion of monastic presence in a region, bringing with it a center of prayer, charity, and learning. For example, the community of Fontevraud, founded by Robert of Arbrissel in the early 12th century, was renowned for its double monastery, housing both monks and nuns under the authority of a female abbess. This unique structure, with its extensive network of dependent priories spread across France and beyond, became a powerful spiritual and administrative empire, demonstrating the extraordinary organization and influential capacity of its successive abbesses. The network of Fontevraud priories created a widespread spiritual movement, drawing in numerous individuals and substantial resources, thereby expanding its empire of influence. Convents also gained influence through their role as economic powerhouses. As discussed in other ways, vast land holdings, agricultural production, and the manufacturing of valuable goods like textiles and illuminated manuscripts provided convents with significant wealth. An abbess who controlled extensive estates could wield considerable economic power, employing large numbers of people, influencing local markets, and even acting as a lender to lesser nobles or townspeople. This economic clout gave them a strong voice in local and regional affairs. For example, the Abbey of Gandersheim in Saxony, a royal foundation, held immense wealth and political sway, with its abbesses often exercising princely rights and even minting their own coins, a clear demonstration of their temporal power and influence in the Holy Roman Empire. This economic independence allowed these institutions to operate with a degree of autonomy and to engage directly with secular authorities as equals, solidifying their position as important players in the medieval landscape. Furthermore, nuns often became significant figures in the church's administrative structure, particularly within their own monastic orders. While generally excluded from direct ordination, abbesses were powerful spiritual leaders within their communities. They were responsible for the spiritual well-being of their nuns, the enforcement of monastic rule, and the celebration of the liturgy. This spiritual authority, combined with their temporal responsibilities, gave them considerable standing within the wider ecclesiastical hierarchy. They negotiated with bishops, archbishops, and even the Pope on matters concerning their convent's rights, exemptions, or spiritual direction. The Abbess Hildegard of Bingen, for instance, corresponded directly with popes, emperors, and kings, offering spiritual counsel and political commentary, touting her remarkable influence that transcended the cloister walls. Her theological writings and prophetic visions were widely disseminated, and her advice was sought by the most powerful figures of her time, demonstrating how a nun's spiritual authority could translate into widespread influence. The educational role of convents also contributed to their long-term influence. By educating noble and aristocratic girls, convents shaped the minds and values of future queens, countesses, and powerful noblewomen. These educated women would then take their places in secular society, often carrying with them the spiritual and intellectual lessons learned in the convent. This created a lasting legacy of influence as the values and education imparted by the nuns filtered into the broader aristocratic culture. The convent thus served as a training ground for future leaders and patrons, ensuring a continuity of support for the monastic life and for Christian values in the secular world. The education provided was often comprehensive, encompassing not only religious instruction, but also literacy, Latin, music, and various practical skills, making the convent-educated woman a highly sought-after bride or advisor in noble circles. Finally, convents often became centers of patronage and cultural production, further extending their influence. Wealthy convents commissioned impressive architecture, supported artists for manuscript illumination, and sponsored the creation of religious artifacts. This not only enhanced the beauty and prestige of their own institutions, but also contributed to the artistic and cultural development of the region. The abbesses, acting as patrons, shaped artistic trends and supported skilled craftspeople, thereby exerting cultural influence beyond their immediate community. For example, the production of lavishly illustrated liturgical books or exquisitely embroidered vestments by nuns were not just internal activities. These items were sometimes gifted to powerful patrons or used in public ceremonies, touting the convent's wealth, skill, and spiritual devotion, thereby enhancing its reputation and influence. Through these diverse avenues, familial connections, new foundations, economic power, ecclesiastical standing, education, and cultural patronage, medieval nuns actively engaged with and profoundly shaped the world around them. Number 6. Legal defenders and administrators. While the primary image of the medieval nun might be one of serene contemplation and prayer, many abbesses and prioresses were in reality formidable legal defenders and meticulous administrators. They were responsible for the complex and often contentious task of managing vast estates, defending their convent's property rights in court, negotiating with powerful secular and ecclesiastical lords, and maintaining intricate financial records. This administrative and legal acumen was not merely an occasional necessity. It was a fundamental aspect of their daily lives, ensuring the survival and prosperity of their religious communities in a world where land, privilege, and law were constantly contested. One of the most frequent legal challenges faced by convents involved defending their property rights. Monasteries, both male and female, often accumulated significant landholdings through pious donations from noble families, royal grants, or purchases. These lands were the economic bedrock of the convent, providing sustenance, income from rents, and resources like timber and stone. However, land ownership in the Middle Ages was frequently disputed. Neighbors, rival lords, or even family members of original donors might challenge the convent's claims, asserting their own rights to certain fields, forests, or mills. When such disputes arose, the abbess, as the legal head of the community, was obligated to defend her convent's interests. This meant engaging in lengthy and often costly legal battles in various courts: manorial courts for local disputes, ecclesiastical courts for church-related matters, or even royal courts for cases involving powerful individuals or royal patronage. An abbess would have to appoint representatives, often male advocates or lawyers, to argue her case, but she herself would be deeply involved in preparing the evidence, consulting with her advisors, and sometimes even appearing in court to present her community's position. This required not only a thorough understanding of the law and custom, but also a keen strategic mind. For example, the abbess of the Abbey of Saint-Odile in Alsace often found herself embroiled in disputes over forest rights and fishing ponds with neighboring lords, requiring extensive legal documentation and negotiation. She would need to produce charters, deeds, and records of past transactions, demonstrating the long-standing nature of the convent's claims. The successful resolution of such cases was paramount, as the loss of land could cripple the convent's economic stability and threaten its ability to support its nuns and charitable works. Beyond land disputes, convents also had to contend with other legal matters, such as the enforcement of feudal obligations owed to them by their tenants, or ensuring that their tenants fulfilled their duties. They might also pursue legal action against individuals who encroached on their liberties or privileges, such as the right to collect tolls, hold markets, or administer justice within their own monastic lands. These liberties, often granted by royal charter, were jealously guarded, as they provided the convent with a degree of autonomy and revenue. Maintaining these privileges required constant vigilance and a willingness to engage in legal proceedings when necessary. Administrative duties were equally demanding. An abbess was effectively the chief executive officer of a large and complex institution. She oversaw the convent's vast estates, which included not only agricultural lands but also mills, bakeries, workshops, and sometimes even urban properties. This involved managing a large workforce of lay servants, tenants, and sometimes even serfs. She would need to appoint stewards, bailiffs, and rees to manage the day-to-day operations of these properties, collect rents and feudal dues, and oversee agricultural production. This required a deep understanding of estate, management, accounting, and human resources. For example, the cartularies and account books of many convents, such as Barking Abbey in England, reveal the intricate detail with which their economic activities were managed, tracking revenues from various sources, expenditures on supplies. These records were often meticulously kept, sometimes spanning centuries, providing an invaluable insight into the administrative capabilities of these women. Furthermore, an abbess was responsible for the convent's finances. This included budgeting for daily expenses, managing investments, handling the convent's treasury, and ensuring long-term financial stability. She would have to decide how to best use the convent's income, whether for repairs to buildings, the purchase of new liturgical items, charitable donations, or support for the nuns themselves. This often involved making difficult economic decisions, especially during times of famine, war, or plague, when resources were scarce and prices volatile. Some convents even engaged in lending money, acting as informal banks for local gentry or townspeople, which required careful record-keeping and a good understanding of financial risks. Maintaining charters and legal documents was another crucial administrative task. Convents were repositories of their own history and rights. Charters from kings, popes, and noble donors, detailing grants of land, privileges, and exemptions, were invaluable legal instruments. The abbess and her scribes would ensure these documents were carefully preserved, copied, and sometimes illuminated, not just for aesthetic appeal but as a tangible record of their legal standing. These records were often presented in court to prove ownership or privilege. The meticulous preservation of these documents, often in a charter chest or muniment room, speaks volumes about the importance placed on legal documentation by these communities. Finally, the abbess was also a diplomat. She constantly negotiated with a range of external authorities: the local bishop who oversaw her spiritual conduct, the regional secular lord who held military or political power, and even the Pope in Rome for special dispensations or exemptions. These negotiations required tact, persuasion, and a keen understanding of power dynamics. She had to balance the need to protect her community's autonomy with the necessity of maintaining good relations with powerful external figures. For example, some abbesses successfully negotiated exemptions from episcopal oversight, placing their convents directly under papal protection, which offered significant legal advantages. Such achievements demonstrate the sophisticated legal and administrative capabilities, who navigated a complex world of law and power with skill and determination, ensuring the enduring legacy of their communities. Number 5. Healers and caregivers. Beyond their spiritual duties and contemplative lives, medieval nuns were also deeply involved in the practical and vital work of healing and caregiving, extending their compassion and medical knowledge far beyond the cloister walls. Convents often functioned as de facto hospitals, hospices, and infirmaries for the sick, the poor, and the infirm from the surrounding communities. This role was rooted in Christian charity, viewing the care of the suffering as a direct service to God, but it also required considerable practical skill in medicine, herbalism, and nursing. The nuns' involvement in healing demonstrates a profound engagement with the physical needs of the outside world, making their convents essential centers of welfare and health in medieval society. Within the convent itself, the care of the sick was a primary concern. Every convent typically had an infirmary, a dedicated building or section where sick nuns were cared for. This space was usually managed by the infirmarian, a nun with specific knowledge of medicine and nursing. She would administer remedies, oversee the diet of the sick, and provide comfort. The nuns themselves often had a practical understanding of herbal medicine, having cultivated medicinal gardens within their cloister walls. These gardens, meticulously tended, provided a wide array of herbs known for their healing properties, such as chamomile for sleep, mint for digestion, or calendula for skin ailments. The knowledge of how to prepare and administer these remedies was passed down through generations within the convent, forming a valuable body of medical practice. However, the nuns' caregiving extended well beyond their own community. Many convents operated hospices or guest houses that offered shelter and care to travelers, pilgrims, and the poor who fell ill while on their journey. These hospices were vital lifelines in a world without public hospitals providing food, a warm bed, and basic medical attention to those in need. The nuns running these facilities would tend to wounds, offer soothing remedies for fevers, and provide comfort to the dying. For instance, the Augustinian canonesses of the Priory of St. Peter in Gloucester were known for their hospitality and care for sick travelers. Provision of such services not only fulfilled a Christian imperative, but also served a practical need in society, as the roads were often treacherous and disease was rampant. Convents also served as centers for the care of the local poor and destitute. Many monastic rules, such as that of Saint Benedict, emphasized hospitality and charity towards the poor. Nuns would regularly distribute food, clothing, and sometimes even money to the needy who gathered at the convent gates. This charity was not always purely reactive. Some convents ran organized almshouses or food kitchens, providing regular sustenance to the indigent in their vicinity. When illness struck a poor family in a nearby village, the convent might be the only place where they could find medical assistance or a healing potion. Nuns, often with greater access to resources and a stable environment, could provide care that was otherwise unavailable. Furthermore, some convents became renowned for the medical expertise of particular nuns. The most famous example is Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century abbess, who was not only a mystic composer and theologian, but also a prolific writer on natural history and medicine. Her works, Physica, on the natural world, and Causae et Curae, on causes and cures of diseases, detail a vast array of herbal remedies, medical theories, and practical advice on health and well-being. While Hildegard herself was an exceptional figure, her writings reflect a broader tradition of medical knowledge within monastic communities. Nuns, by their very nature of being cloistered, often had the time and resources to study, observe, and experiment with medicinal plants and practices, contributing to the limited medical knowledge of the era. Visitors, including nobles and clergy, sometimes sought out specific convents or individual nuns known for their healing abilities, bringing the sick to their doors in hopes of a cure or a blessing. The nun's role in childbirth and infant care, though less documented for cloistered communities, also existed. While noble women often had lay midwives, in some cases the convent might have been seen as a safe haven for women giving birth, or nuns might have provided care for abandoned infants. Orphaned children were sometimes taken in by convents and raised there, demonstrating another dimension of their caregiving role. This act of nurturing and providing for the most vulnerable members of society further cemented the convent's place as a pillar of social welfare. The preparation of medicines was a significant aspect of their healing work. Nuns would gather herbs from their gardens or the wild, dry them, and then prepare various concoctions, salves, poultices, tinctures, and teas. These remedies were not only used within the convent, but also distributed to the local community. The care and precision involved in preparing these herbal medicines reflect a dedicated commitment to physical healing. The knowledge of which plant to use for which ailment, the correct dosage, and the methods of preparation were highly valued skills. This practical application of knowledge made the convent a vital source of healthcare in an age where professional doctors were scarce, particularly in rural areas. In essence, the medieval convent, guided by principles of Christian charity and often possessing resources unavailable elsewhere, served as a crucial institution for health and welfare. Nuns, through their infirmaries, hospices, medicinal gardens, and practical application of herbal knowledge, provided invaluable healing and caregiving services to both their own communities and the wider world. Their compassionate actions were not just an internal monastic duty, but a tangible and indispensable engagement with the physical suffering and needs of medieval society, positioning convents as indispensable centers of social welfare. Number 4. Centers of learning and culture. Far from being isolated havens where intellectual pursuits withered, medieval convents were vibrant centers of learning and cultural production, nurturing scholarship, literacy, and artistic endeavors. Nuns engaged in the copying and illumination of manuscripts, authored original works, and provided an education for girls that was often unparalleled in its breadth and depth during the Middle Ages. This intellectual and artistic activity allowed nuns to shape the cultural landscape, disseminate knowledge, and contribute significantly to the intellectual heritage of their era, showing a dynamic interaction with the outside world through the medium of knowledge. One of the most significant contributions of convents to medieval culture was their role in education, particularly for girls from noble and wealthy families. While boys might attend cathedral schools or universities, convents often provided the primary and sometimes only formal education available to aristocratic girls. This education was comprehensive, extending beyond religious instruction. Girls learned to read and write often in Latin, the universal language of scholarship and the church. They might also learn mathematics, music, embroidery, and household management. This education was not simply for those destined for the cloister. Many girls returned to secular life, becoming literate wives, mothers, and administrators of large estates, carrying with them the intellectual and spiritual values instilled by the nuns. For example, the convent of Quedlinburg in Saxony, founded in the 10th century, was renowned as an educational institution for royal and noble women, producing generations of educated women who played significant roles in German society. The intellectual rigor of these convents ensured that literacy and learning were not exclusive to men, thereby influencing the broader aristocratic society through the women they educated. Another paramount contribution was in the realm of manuscript production. Before the advent of the printing press, books were painstakingly copied by hand, primarily in monasteries and convents. Nuns often had skilled scribes among their number, dedicating hours to transcribing religious texts, chronicles, and even classical literature. This was not merely mechanical copying. It involved careful preservation of knowledge. Beyond copying, many convents were also centers of manuscript illumination, transforming plain texts into exquisite works of art. Nuns, with their artistic talents, would create intricate miniature paintings, elaborate initial letters, and decorative borders using vibrant pigments and sometimes gold leaf. These illuminated manuscripts, often liturgical books like psalters, missals, or books of hours, were highly prized, not only for their spiritual content but also for their immense artistic value. Some of these masterpieces, like the works attributed to the nuns of the Admont Abbey in Austria, still exist today, prodding their remarkable artistic skill and dedication. The production of these valuable books connected the convents to the broader world of patronage and art, as these manuscripts were sometimes commissioned by or gifted to wealthy patrons, thus disseminating the convent's artistic output. Many chronicled their convent's history, wrote spiritual treatises, composed hymns and liturgical dramas, or even penned letters and personal reflections. These writings provide invaluable insights into medieval thought, spirituality, and daily life. The most famous example is Hildegard of Bingen, whose prolific output includes theological works, scientific texts, musical compositions, and numerous letters to prominent figures. Her intellectual contributions were so profound that she was recognized as a doctor of the Church centuries later. Another notable author was Hrotswitha of Gandersheim, a 10th century canonist who wrote Latin dramas inspired by classical Roman playwrights like Terence, but with Christian themes, making her arguably the first known female dramatist in Western Europe. Her plays were performed, showing a clear engagement with the dramatic arts of the time. These nuns demonstrated that intellectual and creative pursuits flourished within the cloister, and their works circulated beyond convent walls, influencing religious thought, literature, and even political discourse. Music was another important aspect of cultural life in convents. Nuns composed, performed, and preserved liturgical music. The chanting of the divine office was a central part of their daily routine, and many convents developed rich musical traditions. Hildegard of Bingen's compositions, for example, are highly distinctive and beautiful, demonstrating a profound understanding of music, theory, and spiritual expression. Performance of these chants and hymns not only enriched the spiritual life of the nuns, but also served as a cultural offering when visitors attended services. Music could also be a form of outreach, with convent choirs, sometimes known for their beautiful singing, attracting attention and appreciation from the outside world. Furthermore, convents served as important libraries and scriptoria, preserving knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. They collected and maintained extensive libraries, filled with religious texts, philosophical works, scientific treatises, and historical chronicles. This role as custodians of knowledge was crucial during times of political instability or intellectual decline in other parts of society. The nuns meticulously cataloged and cared for these precious books, ensuring their survival for future generations. The act of copying and illuminating these texts was not just about creating new books, but also about preserving the intellectual heritage of the past, making the convent a vital link in the chain of knowledge transmission. In essence, medieval convents were far more than just places of prayer. They were dynamic centers of learning, artistic production, and intellectual discourse. Through their roles as educators, scribes, illuminators, authors, and musicians, nuns actively shaped the cultural and intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages. They preserved knowledge, disseminated ideas, and provided a crucial space for female intellectual development, demonstrating their profound and lasting interaction with the wider world of culture and scholarship. Number 3. Family ties and social networks. Despite their vows of seclusion, medieval nuns maintained surprisingly intricate and enduring connections with their families and extensive social networks, profoundly influencing both their personal lives and the strategic positioning of their convents within broader society. These ties were not merely sentimental. They were vital for the convent's financial stability, political influence, and social standing, promoting a constant and dynamic interplay between the cloister and the aristocratic world from which many nuns originated. The very act of a daughter entering a convent often strengthened rather than severed these familial bonds, transforming them into a powerful force for mutual support and influence. For many noble families, sending a daughter to a convent was a strategic decision, not simply a matter of piety. It could ensure that a surplus daughter for whom a suitable marriage might be financially or politically difficult to arrange was honorably placed. It could also secure spiritual benefits for the family through the nun's prayers and establish a lasting spiritual endowment. Convent, in turn, received a dowry or a gift of land, which was crucial for its economic sustenance. This initial transaction established a vested interest for both parties in maintaining the connection. For instance, the daughters of Charlemagne and later Holy Roman emperors were often placed in powerful abbeys like Essen or Gandersheim, which benefited immensely from direct imperial patronage and the prestige of housing imperial kin. Once a woman became a nun, her family did not simply forget her. Visits from family members were a common and significant form of interaction. Parents, siblings, aunts, and uncles would travel to the convent to see their relative, bringing news from the outside world, and often gifts. These visits were carefully regulated by monastic rules to preserve enclosure, typically taking place in designated parlors with grills, but they were nonetheless deeply personal and frequent. During these visits, family matters were discussed, from the health of relatives to dynastic alliances and inheritances. The nun, in turn, would provide spiritual comfort, news from within the convent, and prayers for her kin. These interactions reinforced emotional bonds and kept the nun informed about the affairs of her birth family, ensuring she remained a part of their extended network. Letters were another vital channel for maintaining family ties. particularly for those whose families lived far away. Nuns corresponded with their parents, brothers, and sisters, sharing news, offering spiritual counsel, and sometimes even engaging in subtle political maneuvering. For example, some letters from nuns have been found discussing family inheritances, property disputes, or appeals for financial assistance for the convent. These letters demonstrate that nuns were often active participants in their family's affairs, even from within the cloister. Correspondence between Blanche of Castile, Queen of France, and her daughter Isabella, a poor Clare nun at Longchamp, is a poignant example of a mother and daughter maintaining a deep bond and spiritual connection through letters. Isabella herself was instrumental in founding her own convent, often seeking the counsel and support of her royal mother in this endeavor, showing how familial influence could translate into tangible outcomes for monastic foundation. Beyond personal connections, these family ties translated into direct patronage for the convent. Noble and royal families often became significant benefactors of the convents, where their daughters, sisters, or aunts resided. They would make donations of land, money, vestments, or valuable liturgical objects, providing vital support for the convent's continued existence and prosperity. This patronage was often reciprocal. In return, the convent would offer prayers for the family, act as a spiritual intercessor, and sometimes even serve as a burial place for family members, thereby enhancing the family's spiritual prestige. Convent of St. Sans in Normandy received significant donations from the Giffard family, because several of their daughters and wives had entered the community, illustrating a common pattern of familial financial support. Nuns also played a more direct role in family affairs by acting as trusted intermediaries, or advisors. Because they were perceived as spiritually pure and often politically neutral due to their cloistered status, they could sometimes mediate disputes between feuding noble families or advise their relatives on ethical or political matters. A powerful abbess, known for her wisdom and piety, might be consulted by her royal brother on a difficult decision or asked to intercede with the church on behalf of her family. Her counsel, free from the immediate pressures of secular court life, could be highly valued. Furthermore, the social networks of nuns extended beyond their immediate family to include other aristocratic women, often their former companions from childhood or other daughters of allied families. These networks could be incredibly powerful, facilitating the flow of information, mutual support, and the extension of patronage. A network of abbesses, for instance, might share best practices for convent management, provide refuge for nuns from convents under threat, or collectively advocate for specific reforms within the church. These informal networks formed a powerful substratum of female influence within medieval society. Even after death, family ties remained significant. Many convents maintained necrologies, lists of deceased benefactors and family members for whom prayers were offered. This continuous remembrance reinforced the spiritual connection between the convent and the families that supported it, ensuring a lasting legacy of prayer and patronage. The abbess and her community were often seen as the spiritual guardians of their family's ancestors, responsible for ensuring their soul's passage to heaven. This responsibility deepened the bond and ensured continued interaction between the spiritual realm of the convent and the temporal concerns of the powerful families outside its walls. In summary, the bonds of family and social networks were incredibly resilient and strategically important for medieval nuns. Through visits, letters, patronage, and active involvement in family affairs, nuns maintained dynamic interactions with the aristocratic world, securing the well-being of their convents while also exerting subtle but significant influence on the wider society. These connections reveal that the convent was not a place of absolute separation, but rather an integral and influential part of the elaborate tapestry of medieval family and power. Number 2. Spiritual guides and influencers. Medieval nuns, through their piety spiritual wisdom, and perceived closeness to God became powerful spiritual guides and influencers, drawing individuals from all walks of life to their convents, seeking solace, counsel, and intercession. This profound spiritual impact extended far beyond the cloister walls, making convents crucial centers of religious life and personal devotion for the outside world. From humble pilgrims to powerful monarchs, countless individuals sought the spiritual guidance and prayers of these holy women, demonstrating a continuous and vital interaction rooted in shared faith and spiritual need. One of the most direct ways nuns spiritually influenced the outside world was by receiving pilgrims and guests. Convents, especially those housing revered relics or located along major pilgrimage routes, were frequented by pilgrims seeking spiritual merit, healing, or simply a safe place to rest. The nuns responsible for the guest house or the abbess herself would engage with these pilgrims, offering spiritual comfort, listening to their confessions, and providing blessings. The very presence of a holy community dedicated to constant prayer was often seen as a powerful spiritual magnet. Pilgrims would witness the nuns' devout life, partake in their liturgical services, and feel a sense of spiritual renewal. For example, the Abbey of Saint-Maure-des-Fossés near Paris, while primarily a male monastery, often had female devotees seeking spiritual guidance in its vicinity. And similarly, many female convents like those dedicated to St. Bridget of Kildare in Ireland attracted significant numbers of pilgrims. The interactions with these pilgrims were not just about providing hospitality. They were opportunities for the nuns to share their spiritual insights and to minister to the spiritual needs of the faithful on their journey. Nuns were also sought out for their spiritual counsel by lay people, particularly noble women, who valued their wisdom and discreet advice. Women facing personal dilemmas, marital issues, or difficult moral choices often turned to an experienced abbess or a nun known for her piety for guidance. The perceived purity and spiritual detachment of the cloistered life meant that nuns could offer advice that was free from the political machinations and social pressures of secular court life. This made them trusted confessors and advisors. For instance, the Abbess Hildegard of Bingen received numerous letters from people seeking her spiritual insights, including emperors, kings, bishops, and ordinary lay people, all yearning for her divine guidance and prophetic vision. Her responses often contained sharp spiritual reprimands, profound theological insights, and practical advice on living a virtuous life. This extensive correspondence highlights the high regard in which her spiritual wisdom was held and her significant influence on the moral and spiritual lives of those in power. Intercessory prayer was perhaps the most enduring and widely sought service provided by nuns. Medieval society deeply believed in the power of prayer, especially the prayers of holy individuals. Noble families, wealthy merchants, and even common folk would make donations to convents in exchange for the nuns' prayers for their living relatives, for the souls of their deceased ancestors, or for success in ventures like crusades or business dealings. Constant chanting of the divine office by the nuns was seen as a continuous prayer for the world, a spiritual shield protecting society. Convent, therefore, was a spiritual powerhouse, generating a steady stream of prayers that were believed to influence divine will. The necrologies, or death rolls, kept by convents meticulously listed the names of benefactors for whom prayers were offered daily, demonstrating the contractual spiritual relationship between the convent and its patrons. This spiritual exchange was a fundamental interaction, shaping spiritual practices and beliefs of the broader community. Some nuns were revered as mystics and visionaries, further enhancing their spiritual influence. Figures like Elizabeth of Schonau or Mechthild of Magdeburg had profound mystical experiences and received divine revelations, which they then recorded and shared. Their writings were widely disseminated, read by clergy and lay people alike, and often influenced theological thought and popular piety. These visionary nuns provided a direct link to the divine for many, their experiences inspiring devotion and shaping spiritual understanding. The awe and respect generated by such holy women extended their spiritual authority far beyond the boundaries of their convents. The very example of the nuns' pious lives also served as a powerful spiritual influence. Their dedication to poverty, chastity, and obedience, their rigorous ascetic practices, and their unwavering devotion to God provided a living example of Christian ideals. People visiting convents, attending masses in their churches, or simply hearing about the nuns' holy lives were often inspired to deepen their own faith, to pursue acts of charity, or to adopt a more virtuous lifestyle. The convent, therefore, served as a beacon of spiritual aspiration, influencing the moral and religious conduct of the wider society by its mere existence and the visible devotion of its inhabitants. Finally, nuns often had a role in the veneration and promotion of saints. Convents might house relics of saints, and the nuns would be responsible for their care and for promoting their cults. This could involve organizing special feast days, composing hymns in honor of the saint, or recounting stories of miracles attributed to them. By doing so, the nuns played an active part in shaping popular religious practices and beliefs, contributing to the spiritual landscape of the medieval world. Convents served not just as a place of prayer, but as a center for the propagation of faith and the fostering of popular devotion, further cementing its role as a spiritual guide and influencer in the lives of countless individuals. Number 1. Economic powerhouses. Medieval convents were far from static, isolated institutions. They were dynamic and powerful economic entities, deeply integrated into the material and commercial life of the outside world. Functioning as major landowners, agricultural producers, employers, and even manufacturers, nuns were skilled administrators who managed vast resources, engaged in trade, and contributed significantly to the local and regional economy. Their economic activities were not merely supplementary. They were fundamental to their survival, demonstrating a constant and intricate interaction with the secular world through the exchange of goods, labor, and capital. One of the most significant aspects of a medieval convent's economic power was its extensive land holdings. Through centuries of pious donations from noble families, royal grants, and strategic purchases, many convents accumulated vast estates. These lands included not only agricultural fields but also forests, meadows, vineyards, orchards, and sometimes even urban properties. Managing these diverse land holdings required sophisticated administrative skills. The abbess, as the head of the community, was responsible for overseeing the productivity of these estates, which involved making decisions about crop rotation, animal husbandry, and forest management. For example, the Abbey of Barking in England, a wealthy Benedictine nunnery, controlled numerous manors and properties, providing a substantial and diversified income. The scale of these operations meant convents were major players in the agrarian economy, directly influencing local food supplies and land use patterns. Convents were also significant agricultural producers. The lands they controlled were worked by lay tenants, serfs, or hired laborers, all of whom contributed to the convent's output of essential goods. Nuns oversaw the production of grain, wool, wine, and dairy products. Surplus produce was not simply consumed within the convent, but was actively sold at local markets, bringing in crucial revenue. The nuns, through their lay bailiffs and reeves, negotiated prices, managed transportation, and ensured the quality of their goods. This engagement in the marketplace meant that convents were directly involved in the commercial networks of their region, interacting with merchants, farmers, and consumers. Convents' agricultural output could significantly impact local market prices and the economic well-being of surrounding villages, making them indispensable economic actors. Beyond agriculture, many convents were also centers of specialized production, creating valuable goods that were sought after in the outside world. One of the most renowned forms of production was that of illuminated manuscripts. Nuns, Often highly skilled artists and scribes copied religious texts, chronicles, and other books, embellishing them with intricate illustrations, vibrant colors, and gold leaf. These manuscripts were not only for internal use but were also commissioned by or gifted to wealthy patrons, including royalty and powerful clergy, creating a demand for their artistic output. The production of these luxury items required sourcing expensive materials like parchment, pigments, and gold, further connecting the convents to broader trade networks. Similarly, many convents were known for their production of fine textiles, including elaborate embroideries, vestments, and tapestries. These works of art, often made with precious threads and intricate designs, were highly valued and sometimes sold or given as prestigious gifts, proving the nuns' craftsmanship and artistic prowess to a wider audience. For example, the community at Wilton Abbey in England was celebrated for its needlework and embroidery. Convents were also major employers of labor, managing large estates, constructing and maintaining buildings, and running various workshops required a substantial workforce of lay servants, craftsmen, and laborers. These individuals, drawn from the local population, earned wages or received provisions from the convent, providing an important source of employment in the medieval economy. The abbess and her officials would oversee these employees, managing their tasks, wages, and living conditions. This employment relationship created a direct economic link between the convent and the surrounding lay communities, shaping local employment patterns and livelihoods. Furthermore, some convents engaged in financial activities that resemble modern banking. Wealthy convents with surplus funds sometimes acted as lenders to lesser nobles, merchants, or even distressed royal families, providing loans with interest. This required careful accounting and risk assessment, making the nuns adept at financial management. These loans strengthened the convent's economic ties to powerful secular figures and provided an additional source of income. Convent's treasury was often substantial, containing not only coin but also precious objects, relics, and important legal documents. Prudent management of these assets was a core administrative duty, ensuring the long-term financial viability of the institution. Finally, convents held significant economic power through their rights to tolls, markets, and mills. Many royal or noble grants bestowed upon convents the right to collect tolls on roads or bridges within their lands, to hold weekly markets where goods were traded, or to own and operate mills for grinding grain. These privileges provided steady streams of income and placed the convent at the center of local commerce. The administration of a market, for instance, involved collecting fees from traders, settling disputes, and ensuring order, directly integrating the nuns through their appointed officials into the daily economic life of their region. These varied economic activities demonstrate that medieval nuns were not just spiritual recluses, but were formidable economic powerhouses, actively engaged in the material world, shaping markets, employing labor, and contributing significantly to the medieval economy.